We treat clocks like a convenience, something we can adjust twice a year without real consequences. But time is not just a number on a screen. It is a system that keeps millions of people safe every single day. And by the end of this video, you'll understand how time zones quietly saved lives. Here's the strange part. For most of human history, time zones didn't exist at all. People lived by daylight. Noon meant the sun was directly overhead. Each town followed its own solar time, and that worked just fine. You woke up at sunrise, worked until sunset, and went to sleep. This simple system only failed when distance stopped being small. And this is where everything started to break. When travel became fast, with the rise of railroads and the telegraph, time turned chaotic. A train could leave one city at 10 a.m. and arrive in another city at 10:05 a.m., even though it had traveled for hours. Scheduling became a nightmare. The sun can't be overhead in multiple places at once, and suddenly time itself was no longer reliable. Trying to fix this created an even bigger problem. The obvious solution seemed simple: use one time for the entire country. Some nations did exactly that, using the capital's solar time. But in large countries, this approach failed quickly. In Russia, for example, trains and telegraphs followed the time in St. Petersburg. Meanwhile, the rest of the country continued living by local solar time. Officially, there was one time. In reality, there were several. This confusion couldn't last, and that's when a global idea changed everything. This is the real turning point. One engineer redesigned time itself. In the 1870s, Canadian engineer Sir Sandford Fleming proposed dividing Earth into 24 time zones. Each zone covered 15 degrees of longitude. Each step changed the clock by exactly 1 hour. After long debates, the prime reference was set at the Greenwich Meridian. For the first time, time became a coordinated global system. Without this, modern transportation, communication, and safety would be impossible. But people weren't done adjusting time yet. A new complaint soon appeared. This time, it was about sunlight. In Europe, people noticed that summer sunrises came too early, long before anyone was awake, and sunsets came too soon, just when people were free to enjoy the evening. During World War I, Germany shifted the clocks, not for comfort, but to save energy. More daylight meant less electricity used at night. That's how daylight saving time was born. And in truth, energy savings remain its only real justification. But changing time came with hidden costs. Those costs turned out to be biological, and they affect everyone. Shifting clocks disrupts circadian rhythms, sleep quality drops, focus and productivity decline, health risks increase. But constant darkness creates problems too. Low light levels increase melatonin production, the hormone that signals sleep. Over time, this can lead to fatigue and seasonal depression. So here's the paradox. Too much adjustment harms us, but ignoring daylight harms us too, which means the real solution isn't just moving the clock. Here's the key insight. Time zones were never about convenience. What feels like a simple division of time is actually a system that saved transportation, communication, and human lives. But forcing people to constantly adapt to artificial time changes was a mistake. The real balance isn't in shifting clocks back and forth. It's in aligning our work schedules with natural daylight. Sometimes the smartest solution isn't changing time at all. It's learning how to live with it. Humans have a lot of paired organs. 2 eyes, 2 ears, and we understand why those come in pairs. But nostrils are different. They're close together, and our sense of smell isn't even that strong. So by the end of this video, you'll see why having 2 nostrils matters far more than it seems. Let's start with what feels obvious. Nature usually doesn't duplicate organs without a reason. 2 eyes give us depth perception. 2 ears help us locate the direction of sound. That logic makes sense. But when it comes to nostrils, it feels unnecessary. The smells don't seem different. The distance between them is tiny. At first glance, it looks like one of them could be redundant. But that assumption turns out to be wrong. Here's a fact most people don't know. Your nostrils don't work equally. Throughout the day, one nostril is always more open than the other. Air flows more easily through one side, while the other works less efficiently. This dominant nostril switches over time. At first, that sounds like a flaw. Why would the body design a system that never works evenly? But this imbalance is exactly what makes the system effective. To understand why, we need to look at how smell actually works. Smelling something doesn't happen in the nose itself. It happens in the brain. Odor molecules must travel through the nasal passages and reach the olfactory center in the cerebral cortex. Along the way, those molecules interact with mucus and epithelial tissue, and this is the key point. Different molecules are absorbed at different speeds. Some are captured very quickly, others move more slowly. One single airflow speed would fail to detect them all. This is where having 2 nostrils becomes essential. The more open nostril helps fast-absorbing molecules reach receptors before they disperse. The less active nostril slows airflow, giving slower molecules enough time to interact with the olfactory receptors instead of rushing straight into the lungs. Together, the brain receives a richer chemical signal. We detect a wider range of smells even though we're not consciously aware of it. But that's not the only advantage. Researchers at Berkeley wanted to test something further. Can humans orient themselves using smell like animals do? In their experiments, participants were blindfolded and had their hearing blocked. They were then placed on a lawn where a thin trail of scented oil had been laid out. Out of 32 participants, 21 were able to follow the scent trail correctly. This suggested that humans have a limited form of stereo smelling. To understand how this works, scientists visualized airflow patterns. They discovered that the regions processed by each nostril are separated by an average of about 3.5 centimeters. That distance is enough for the brain to compare signals from both sides. Just like with hearing, the brain can detect slight differences and infer the direction of a smell. In animals that rely heavily on scent, this ability is even more pronounced. Take moles, for example. American biologists observed how moles searched for food in controlled environments. With both nostrils open, they found their target quickly and accurately. When one nostril was blocked, the animals became slower, and their search path shifted about 20 degrees toward the open nostril. Even a small loss of symmetry disrupted their sense of direction. Here's the takeaway. 2 nostrils are not a backup system. They're not an evolutionary accident. They form a mechanism that expands our sense of smell and helps us orient in space. What looks redundant actually increases how much information the brain receives. So yes, both nostrils matter, even if you're not a mole. What if losing your virginity isn't just a personal milestone, but something connected to your biology, your temperament, and even your genes? For thousands of years, virginity has been treated as a moral label, a measure of purity, a marker of character. But science asks a very different question. Does virginity actually have a biological role? And could the timing of losing it reveal something deeper about how we're wired? The answers come from anatomy, genetics, and a discovery that surprised researchers themselves. Why virginity became such a big deal? Virginity has fascinated and controlled human behavior for millennia, yet few people can clearly explain why it exists at all. Technically, virginity simply means a lack of sexual experience, but in reality, almost all cultural attention has focused on female virginity. That focus exists for one reason. There is a visible anatomical structure that people believed could prove it, and that belief created centuries of misunderstanding. What the hymen really is. The hymen is not a seal, it is not a barrier, and it is not proof of sexual history. It's a thin layer of mucus and connective tissue located between the external and internal genital structures. The hymen begins forming before birth, around the 7th week of fetal development, and finishes forming by about the 5th month. Crucially, a healthy hymen always has an opening, sometimes one, sometimes several. Without it, menstrual blood could not leave the body, and surgery would be required. And this is where the myths begin to fall apart. Why losing virginity doesn't always mean tearing. Hymens vary widely from person to person, in thickness, in shape, in elasticity. Some stretch instead of tearing, even after multiple sexual encounters. Bleeding during first intercourse is not guaranteed. It depends on blood vessel placement, not morality or experience. Pregnancy is even possible with an intact hymen. This lack of understanding turned a normal anatomical variation into a source of shame, pressure, and suffering for millions of women, which raises a deeper question. If the biology is so inconsistent, why does the hymen exist at all? But anatomy is only part of the story. The most unexpected insight came from genetics. A genetic discovery that changed the conversation. In 2016, an international team of scientists from the UK, Iceland, and the United States, led by geneticist John Perry, conducted a large-scale genetic study. They analyzed the genomes of 125,000 people between the ages of 40 and 70. What they found surprised them. Researchers identified 38 genes linked to the age at which people began their sexual lives. And those genes weren't random. Many of the identified genes were associated with earlier puberty, higher impulsivity, greater irritability, and a tendency toward risk-taking behavior. People with these traits, on average, started having sex earlier. This doesn't mean genes make decisions for us, but they can influence temperament, self-control, and how strongly we respond to impulses. Virginity, it turns out, isn't just a cultural concept. It's also connected to biology and personality. Losing virginity is an important moment in many lives, but it is not a measure of worth, not a test of morality, and not a simple choice detached from biology. It sits at the intersection of anatomy, hormones, genetics, and social expectations. A thin piece of connective tissue was never meant to define a human being. And once again, science reminds us of something crucial. Reality is more complex than our myths. But that complexity is exactly what makes it worth understanding. There's a part of your body most people barely think about. Some even joke that it's useless, awkward, just there, and yet without it, you wouldn't be able to speak clearly, eat safely, or even drink a glass of water without risking your life. So how did one of the most critical survival mechanisms in the human body get labeled as useless? And why does this small structure on your neck quietly control your voice, your breathing, and your safety every single day? By the end of this video, you'll never look at your own throat the same way again. The myth that fooled generations. For centuries, people believed a strange story. According to an old biblical legend, Adam bit into the forbidden apple, realized he'd been deceived, and choked. The piece of fruit supposedly got stuck in his throat, leaving a permanent bump. That bump, the story says, was passed down to all men as Adam's apple. It's a memorable myth. But once we step into the world of anatomy, a far more interesting question appears. If this isn't a leftover from a divine mistake, then what is it actually doing there? What the Adam's apple really is. Despite the name, the Adam's apple isn't a separate organ at all. It's a protrusion of the larynx, formed by the thyroid cartilage. And here's something most people don't realize. Everyone has one, men and women alike. During puberty, hormones reshape the larynx, but they don't do it the same way in every body. In women, the cartilage plates don't fuse at a sharp angle, and the structure stays relatively hidden beneath soft tissue. You might not see it, but you can still feel it if you try. In men, the plates fuse more sharply, the larynx grows larger, and that's when the Adam's apple becomes visible. Which brings us directly to the voice. Why your voice changes forever. When boys go through puberty, their voice doesn't crack by accident. It's physics and biology working together. The vocal cords lengthen, the larynx grows, the cartilage hardens. This transformation lowers the pitch of the voice and gives it depth. The entire process usually finishes around the late teenage years. Hormones like testosterone strengthen the cartilage even further, and with that change comes something remarkable: control. A built-in voice control system. The Adam's apple isn't fixed in place. It moves. Muscles can raise or lower it, adjusting the tension of the vocal cords. Air passing through those cords creates sound, and tiny shifts in position change the tone. You can see this yourself. Stand in front of a mirror and make the lowest sound you can. Watch what happens. The Adam's apple drops. You're not just making noise. You're actively tuning your voice. But sound is only part of the story, because this structure has a job that matters even more than how you speak. One of the most critical roles of the Adam's apple is protection. It helps shield the larynx and vocal cords, but more importantly, it plays a role in keeping food and liquid out of your airway. Every time you swallow, your body must perfectly separate two paths, one for air, one for food. Without this system, even drinking water could send liquid into your lungs, and that can be fatal. The Adam's apple is part of the reason eating feels effortless instead of dangerous. Which also explains why injuries to this area are so serious. The neck is incredibly exposed. And around the Adam's apple, there's a dense network of nerves. A strong blow to this area can confuse the nervous system. The brain may trigger a dangerous reflex. Sudden loss of consciousness. In extreme cases, even cardiac arrest. Severe trauma can damage the trachea itself. A broken fragment can block airflow to the lungs. That's when it becomes clear. This useless bump is actually guarding some of the most essential systems keeping you alive. So why not just change it if you don't like your voice? Many people dislike how they sound, and modern medicine can technically alter the larynx. But this is one of the riskiest procedures in the body. Damage the vocal cords, and the results can be permanent and unpredictable. A different voice, loss of vocal control, or serious speech disorders. The system is delicate for a reason. It wasn't designed to be modified. It was designed to work. Whether you're male or female, you have an Adam's apple. It helps you speak. It helps you breathe. It helps you eat without fear. It's not a useless leftover from evolution. It's a quiet, underrated guardian of your everyday survival. And sometimes, the most important parts of us are the ones we never think about at all. And that's baby science for you.